Join our community by subscribing. Every click helps us share more stories like this one. The introduction. The soft hum of the cicadas filled the hot summer night, their rhythmic song hanging heavily above the small town of Willow Creek. Nestled among rolling hills, the town had always seemed an idyllic retreat from the turmoil of the outside world. Families walked hand in hand down Main Street. Children laughed at the local diner, and life unfolded at a predictable pace, leading residents to believe that nothing could disturb their peaceful existence. But on this particular evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows over the quaint houses, a sense of unease began to settle in. At approximately 9:15 p.m., the tranquility was shattered by the piercing wail of a siren. Emergency lights sliced through the darkness, illuminating the faces of local deputies who rushed toward the newly constructed park, a site that had been the pride of the community. What had been intended as a space for laughter and play had become the backdrop of something far more sinister. The call had come in just moments before. A body had been discovered in the woods bordering the park. A faint hope flickered through the officers' minds that perhaps it was nothing more than an unfortunate accident. But as they made their way into the thick clusters of trees, that fragile hope began to erode, replaced by a chilling realization. The undergrowth crunched underfoot, and the air thickened with dread. What lay ahead would unravel the very fabric of Willow Creek, turning neighbor against neighbor, as the community was forced to confront the shadows lurking among them. The past would claw its way into the present, and secrets long buried would be unearthed, revealing that this picturesque town was not as it seemed. As the moon rose high, its light casting eerie shadows, the stage was set for what would soon become one of the most perplexing murder investigations in the town's history. The victim. The body lay still beneath a shroud of fallen leaves, its presence disrupting the natural harmony of the woodland. Sheriff Dan Mitchell knelt beside the lifeless figure, the dim glow of his flashlight unveiling the stark reality of the scene. It was a young woman, no older than 23. Her once vibrant auburn hair now dulled against the earth. The remnants of her innocence contrasted painfully with the brutality of her demise. As the initial shock faded, he turned to his deputy, Sarah Lopez, whose own face reflected a mix of horror and sympathy. She had spent her childhood in Willow Creek, enjoying the same parks and trails that now hosted tragedy. "Who could do this?" she whispered, eyes wide with disbelief. Identifying the victim became the immediate priority. As soon as the coroner arrived, the meticulous process of examination began. With each reveal a scar on the forearm, a distinctive tattoo of a heartbeat intertwined with ivy more pieces of her life emerged. They quickly learned that her name was Emily Granger, a local artist who had captivated the area with her vibrant murals. Those closest to her painted a picture of Emily as a dreamer with a wild spirit, often exploring the world with her camera in hand and capturing the essence of Willow Creek through her art. Friends spoke of her contagious laughter and a heart that sought beauty in the mundane. But as the investigation deepened, cracks in her seemingly perfect life began to appear. Despite her talents, there were whispers in the town, rumors of unrequited love, a turbulent friendship, and hints of conflict that traveled just beneath the surface. The more they dug, the more layers of complexity emerged, suggesting that the serene image of a loving community sheltered darker secrets. The light of the street lamps flickered dimly as the coroner covered Emily's body. There was a sense that nothing in Willow Creek would ever be the same again. The very fabric of the town was unraveling, revealing that the veneer of normalcy could not shield it from the cruelty of the world. Emily's story was just beginning, and those who knew her would soon find themselves entangled in a web of distrust, facing the haunting question: who would want to hurt a kind soul like Emily Granger? The crime scene. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth as Sheriff Mitchell meticulously roped off the area surrounding the scene. A painstaking endeavor that now felt overwhelmingly urgent. Each passerby, confused and worried, was ushered back away from what had become a sacred site of grief and inquiry in the fading light of day. The sound of footsteps was muffled by the softness of the undergrowth, but the whispers of townsfolk underscored the gravity of the moment. Beneath the canopy of trees, the ground bore the imprints of a struggle. Twigs lay scattered, broken and displaced, as if the very earth resented the violence that had transpired within its embrace. Sheriff Mitchell's flashlight beam danced across the foliage, highlighting fragments of fabric caught on branches, a small, torn piece of a floral dress that matched what Emily had worn earlier that day. A chill ran through the sheriff as he bent down to examine it more closely, the realization sinking in. The struggle had been real, and it had taken place here. The deputies flagged off the disturbed area as the forensic team arrived, equipped with tools that promised to unveil the secrets the woods had been holding. Officer Lopez began photographing the scene, each click of the camera capturing evidence that would sift through the labyrinth of conjecture and prepare the path toward justice. In the backdrop, the distant murmur of sorrowing neighbors melded with the rustle of the wind, emphasizing the profound sense of loss. Nearby, a woman, visibly shaken, had collapsed on a park bench, clutching her phone like a lifeline. A friend rushed to her side, her voice frantic as she attempted to piece together the events of the last few hours. In the haze of shock, information about Emily began to emerge at last. Seen leaving her favorite cafe after a late afternoon meeting. That she was perhaps followed, or that she had mentioned a local creeper who watched her paint. As daylight waned, desperation cast a shadow over the investigation. The reality sank deep into the sheriffs and deputies alike. They were not only tasked with uncovering a murderer, but deciphering the very character of a community they believed could be trusted. The woods stood silently, witnesses to a crime that cut deeper than any blade had. In those moments, Willow Creek's innocence began to tarnish, revealing that even the most serene places could harbor darkness, and the hunt for truth had only just begun. The early investigation. The atmosphere in the sheriff's office was thick with tension as the investigation kicked into high gear. Whiteboards lined the walls, strewn with photographs of Emily Granger, maps of the town, and a timeline of events that expanded with each passing hour. Sheriff Mitchell sat at the head of the table, his brow furrowed in concentration as he reviewed the evidence with his team. The initial shock of discovery had given way to a relentless determination to seek out the truth. Start canvassing the area, he instructed his team. We need to speak to everyone who might have seen her last night. Every detail counts. Deputy Lopez busied herself combing through social media. Emily had been active on various platforms, her posts filled with colorful images of her artwork and snippets of her Lifian artist, overflowing with creativity. Yet, as she sifted through the comments, a pattern began to emerge. Beneath the encouraging messages were glimpses of unease. One particular comment stood out, making the hairs on the back of her neck prickle. Keep your doors locked, Emily. Some people will go to any length for attention. Lopez shared the message with Sheriff Mitchell, who leaned in, his interest piqued. Who posted that? Someone named Jason Niles, she replied, her voice steady with purpose. He's listed as a friend, but I can't find much else about him. Outside, the sun had dipped below the horizon, painting the town in hues of twilight. Deputies spread across the streets, echoing the sheriff's plea. If anyone saw anything unusual last night, please come forward. As they moved from house to house, faces of confusion and fear stared back at them. At the local diner, the usual laughter had turned into hushed conversation. Customers clutched steaming mugs of coffee as they exchanged theories and whispered about the artist who had painted their town. Some recalled seeing Emily earlier in the day, her eyes sparkling with passion, while others cited dark figures lingering at the park after sunset. Despite the mounting tension, they held on to one tenuous thread. Every revelation drawn from interviews, every text exchanged among friends, seemed to lead them closer to both Emily's life and her death. Each fragment offered a glimpse into the complexity of her relationships, the triumphs, the struggles, and the connections she forged within her small world. By the end of the day, the air was heavy with unvoiced fears, but there was a growing understanding among the deputies. This was not merely a case to be solved, it was a mirror reflecting the vulnerabilities of a closely knit community. They were not about to rest until justice was served, weaving the dark fabric of Emily's story into a narrative that transcended tragedy, determined to uncover the truth hidden in the shadows of Willow Creek. The dead-ends days bled into each other, and with each sunrise, the weight of Emily Granger's death pressed down heavier on the shoulders of Willow Creek. Sheriff Mitchell and his team worked tirelessly, interviewing dozens of locals, yet every lead seemed to unravel into a frayed thread, each piece of information leading to another dead end. The initial excitement of the investigation gave way to exhaustion, a gnawing frustration growing in the pit of their stomachs. Jason Niles, the friend who had issued that ominous warning on social media, had turned out to be unhelpful and evasive. When finally located at a local bar, he seemed almost too casual. "I had no idea anything was wrong with Emily," he said, swirling his drink with a limp hand. "Yeah, I'm friends with her on Facebook, but I haven't seen her in months." Deputy Lopez's gut churned at his disinterest. She pushed harder, but his answers were like smoke, drifting just out of reach. "You didn't see her around town? Didn't hear anything?" He shrugged, his expression vacant. "People talk. They call me creepy, but I'm just a guy trying to get by." After a whirlwind of leads that ultimately vanished, the team reconvened at headquarters, where the mood was somber. Whiteboards now bore marks of indecision, trails of inquiry leading to blank spaces where hopeful notes had once flourished. "Jake and Lisa from the cafe haven't seen anything either," Lopez stated, her voice heavy. "They said she stopped by for coffee, but didn't mention anyone unusual hanging around." Mitchell sighed, running a hand through his hair. "We need to rethink our approach. It's as if everyone's eyes were closed the night she died. As the hours dwindled, a constant backdrop of murmured conspiracy theories and fear swept across town. Rumors sparked unease. Many wondered if the killer was someone they knew. Someone they passed on the street daily. The streets grew quiet, with whispers lapping at the edges of conversations. Trust eroded and friendships buckled. Desperation clung like fog. The deputies dove deeper into backgrounds, searching through old reports, hoping to find a clue in Emily's past. But as they dug, the sense of futility intensified. It seemed less of a murder investigation and more of a ghost story, lingering between the shadows of the town and the echoes of the vibrant woman they had lost. But Mitchell refused to give in. Somewhere amidst the frustration lay a thread. He could feel its presence, elusive yet palpable. With time ticking by, the path toward conviction remained paved with uncertainty. Whether they would unravel it remained unanswered. But what was clear was this: Willow Creek could not bury its secrets forever. A break in the case. Just as the sun began its ascent, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, a flicker of hope ignited within the sheriff's office. The persistent hum of phones and the scrawling of notes had become a daily ritual. But that morning, a new voice cut through the monotony. Deputy Lopez leaned back in her chair, staring at her screen with renewed intensity. "Sheriff, you need to see this," she called, her tone laced with disbelief. Mitchell glanced up from the file, sprawled before him, lifting an eyebrow as he made his way to her desk. Lopez was fixated on an online discussion thread that revolved around Emily's murder. "There's a post here from a user named Lost in the Woods. They claim to have seen a man loitering near the park right before Emily's death," she shared, her fingers tapping furiously at the keyboard to expand the thread. Taking a closer look, Mitchell noticed the timestamps matched perfectly with the timeline of Emily's disappearance. The poster detailed how this man had an unusual air about him, like he didn't belong. He wore a dark jacket and appeared to be watching the park, even as dusk settled. Lopez continued. They commented that the man had a distinct tattoo on his wrist, something that could be described as a jagged line, similar to light. What if it connects to someone here? They wasted no time. With the description burned into their minds, Lopez and Mitchell led their team to the outskirts of the park, searching for any remnants of the unusual figure. The sun, now high in the sky, cast long shadows among the trees as they combed through the area, retracing Emily's last steps. Then, as they rounded a bend just past the spot where Emily had been found, they stumbled upon a dilapidated shed hidden among the underbrush. It had an identifiable energy, perhaps a sense of wrongness, emanating from its rotting walls. The door creaked open with a disturbing groan, revealing a trove of forgotten items, obscured in darkness. Lopez stepped inside, her breath catching. Tacked to the wall were crude sketches, resembling Emily's style, intermingled with jarring scrawls that expressed twisted admiration. Among the clutter lay an old jacket whose sleeve was torn, revealing a jagged tattoo, just as described. "Sheriff, I think we found him," she gasped, her excitement punctured with disbelief. As they swiftly called for backup and contained the site, a surge of adrenaline coursed through Mitchell. The narrative of their investigation began to reshape itself, moving from despair toward purpose. They could feel the weight of progress settle in their bones as they pieced together the fragments of this chilling puzzle. The search for the owner of that tattoo would lead them closer to the truth. They could feel it in the electrifying air. For the first time since Emily's death, there was a sense of clarity pressing through the fog of uncertainty. Willow Creek's tangled history was on the brink of being laid bare, and justice, once an elusive ghost, appeared to be finally taking shape. The suspect. The commotion outside the shed drew more deputies as the news spread like wildfire. Evidence had finally emerged, and with it, a suspect lurking in the shadows of Willow Creek. Sheriff Mitchell stood at the entrance, his mind racing with possibilities. The jagged tattoo marked a line between the town's tranquility and the growing horror that had tightened its grip on the community. The officers fanned out, seeking answers amidst the forgotten relics as they scoured the shed for anything that could further film the suspect. Files and art supplies littered the floor, evidence of someone who had once found solace in creativity, but whose path had taken a dangerous turn. Lopez pulled out a sketchbook and flipped through its pages, her heart beating faster. Each drawing was a dark reflection of Emily's style, yet warped with disturbing undertones. Pictures of parks, shadows of figures moving in and out of the frame, images that felt uncomfortably predatory. "This isn't just admiration," she said quietly, showing the pages to Mitchell. "This is obsession." With the new evidence in hand, they turned their focus toward identifying the owner of the jacket, specifically the man with the tattoo. As the sun dipped low in the sky, casting long shadows down Main Street, their leading theory brought them to a figure named Caleb Rains, a resident known for his erratic behavior and occasional obsession with local art. He was viewed as a harmless misfit, often seen lurking outside the cafes and parks where Emily painted. But they had paid him little notice until now. "Let's pay him a visit," Mitchell decided. His eyes filled with steely determination. They gathered the team and drove toward Caleb's dilapidated home, a small cabin that had long since been swallowed by the overgrowth. Visions of darkened windows and an unsettling aura surrounded it, warning them of the potential confrontation ahead. As they approached the door, they exchanged glances, readying themselves for anything. Lopez knocked firmly, but the only response was the eerie creaking of wood. After a pause, they made their presence known. "Caleb Rains, this is the sheriff's department. We need to ask you some questions." A few moments stretched into eternity before the door finally swung open in a slow, deliberate manner. The man before them was disheveled, his eyes sunken and darting around as if he'd been caught in a web. As Mitchell began outlining their purpose, Caleb's gaze flitted nervously away from them. "Listen, I didn't hurt her," he blurted, his voice trembling, cutting through the tension. "I just wanted to understand her. She saw the world so differently." "I only watched, I swear." Lopez felt a chill snake up her spine as she exchanged looks with Mitchell. The mounting evidence weighed down upon Themp's jacket, the sketches, the tattoo he had found someone buried under layers of fear and fascination with Emily. They pressed for more details, spinning a web of questions to weave out his story, intricately trying to pull at the thread of truth hidden among the chaos. Would they unearth the guilty heart beneath this mask of fervent admiration? As the evening light faded around them, it became increasingly clear that Caleb Rains was not just a figure in the town's periphery. He was at the center of a storm, and unraveling his connection to Emily was their next step toward justice. The trial. The courtroom buzzed with attention palpable enough to slice through the air as spectators took their seats. Reporters crowded the back, their notepads poised, ready to capture every dramatic moment of the trial that had gripped Willow Creek. The hushed conversations flickered like the shadows that danced along the walls, a somber echo of the life that had been stolen far too soon. Sheriff Mitchell sat near the front, a mix of hope and apprehension settled deep with. After weeks of investigation, uncovering layers of Caleb Rains' hidden life, the trial had finally begun. Emily's family, once vibrant and full of life, now wore the heavy cloak of grief. They had come seeking closure, desperate to understand how one of their own had become entangled in the macabre. As the judge entered, a hush swept across the room. Rains, seated at his defense table, looked diminished under the bright lights and heavy scrutiny. His unruly hair fell into his eyes, reflecting a fractured psyche. On the opposite side, The prosecution team assembled, ready to lay bare the evidence that would weave together the crisscrossing threads of obsession and violence. The trial unfolded with deliberate pacing, each witness recounting their memories of Emily, painting a portrait of a young woman whose spirit had illuminated the community. Friends and family shared their stories, laughter mingling with tears. But as each testimony rolled in, the shadow of Rains loomed larger. When the prosecutor called for evidentiary pieces, Lopez's heart raced as she took the stand. She recounted the discoveries at the shed, Caleb's crude sketches, the jagged tattoo, and the items that hinted at a darker obsession. She watched Rains fidget in his seat, his face paling as she detailed the implications of what they had found. When it was time for Rains to take the stand, a curtain of silence fell. His voice quivered as he spoke, a strange cocktail of remorse and indignation in his words. "I only wanted to connect with her art. I never meant to hurt anyone. I never meant to hurt anyone," he exclaimed, desperation curling around each phrase. A seasoned defense attorney challenged him, and the courtroom shifted as promised contradictions surfaced. "Why had you been outside the cafe where she painted?" The attorney pressed. "You say you didn't follow her, but many saw you lurking. Who were you trying to connect with?" Rains's grip tightened around the edges of the stand, his previous bravado crumbling under the weight of truth. As the day wore on, the tension in the room escalated with compelling evidence presented, pieces of the puzzle falling into place. Climaxing, the prosecution unveiled the final piece, a chilling recording of Caleb's own voice, recorded during an unwitting moment while he spoke to himself in the shed, revealing breaths of rage, jealousy, and fixation that sent shockwaves through the courtroom. Whispers stirred among the audience. Many recoiled in horror, understanding that this was no innocent artist but a man driven into darkness by his own demons. As day faded into night, the jury filed out, an eerie silence enveloping the courtroom. The waiting felt agonizing, each tick of the clock stretching into eternity. When they finally returned, anticipation hung thick in the air. The foreman's voice rang clear. "We, the jury, find the defendant guilty of second-degree murder." Relief and sorrow mingled on the faces of Emily's family. As tears flowed freely, their answers had come at a cost. As Caleb Rains was led away, the burden of grief lingered, an unshakable shadow that would forever haunt Willow Creek. With the trial concluded, the mental scars left by the loss would need time to heal. But for now, a measure of justice had been served. The truth had emerged from the darkness, revealing the fragility of connection both in art and in life, and how easily they could fracture under the weight of obsession. The aftermath. The days following the trial were marked by a stillness that settled over Willow Creek like a thick fog. The verdict against Caleb Rains had brought a semblance of justice, but the scars ran deep. The community, already fractured by grief, now grappled with the reality of a murdered local artist and the twisted mind that had sought to possess her spirit. For many, finding solace felt like a distant memory, as shadows from Emily's death lingered at the edges of everyday life. Sheriff Mitchell ventured into town for the first time since the trial, the weight of Emily's absence clawing at him. He walked down Main Street, the familiar sights juxtaposed with an eerie silence. Friends who once greeted him with smiles now exchanged cautious glances, their laughter silenced by a communal sorrow. It was as if the very essence of Willow Creek had dimmed, the vibrancy replaced by whispered conversations and closed doors. At the local diner, he took a seat at a table next to the window, watching as patrons shared coffee, but avoided eye contact. The waitress, usually effervescent, brought his meal with a heavy heart. "Sheriff, they say time heals all wounds," she said, voice trembling. "But it doesn't feel that way for us." Mitchell nodded, aware of the truth in her words. At that moment, he recognized that healing wouldn't come from the passage of time alone. It required intention, a conscious choice to embrace their shared loss and rebuild the sense of community that had been shattered. That Saturday, they held a vigil in Emily's honor at the park where she had shared so many moments of joy. The early spring air was crisp, blending smells of pine and earth as townsfolk gathered, holding candles that flickered like memories in darkness. As the sun dipped below the horizon, a soft glow enveloped the crowd. Family and friends stepped forward to share stories of Emily's warmth and passion, reclaiming her legacy against the backdrop of sorrow. Each anecdote, threaded with laughter and tears, began to stitch together the fabric of their community anew. In those moments, amid the flickering flames, it became evident that Emily was not merely a victim. She had been a beacon of creativity and love that would continue to illuminate the town's path forward. Sheriff Mitchell spoke last, his voice steady but laced with emotion. Emily wasn't just an artist. She was the heart of this town. Her spirit challenges us to live boldly, to embrace life and one another in every moment. He paused, looking out at the faces illuminated by candlelight, a mix of compassion, grief, and resolve. We owe it to her to carry on and protect what she loved. As the vigil closed, a sense of unity began to emerge from the darkness, an undeniable strength they could use to forge ahead. While the scars from this tragedy would never fully fade, Willow Creek could bear witness to the beauty that once thrived within their community, and in that acknowledgement, they could find a way to heal. In the months that followed, Emily's murals became a symbol of resilience, painted over with fresh expressions of hope by local artists who drew inspiration from her life. The park she had loved flourished with new blossoms, reclaiming its role as a haven for creativity and laughter. Slowly, the tapestry of Willow Creek began to reweave itself, guided by the bright light of memory. Though nothing would bring Emily back, the heart of her community beat on, fueled by the lessons learned from loss and the unwavering resolve to protect the light against the encroaching darkness. Together, they stood bound by tragedy, but emerging stronger and more connected than ever before, ready to face the unknown paths that lay ahead. Reflection. As the sun set one last time over Willow Creek, Sheriff Mitchell found himself standing at the edge of the park, where vibrant flowers swayed gently in the evening breeze. The events of the past months replayed in his mind like a relentless montage, a reminder of a life so garishly extinguished. Standing amongst the blooming art that had emerged in tribute to Emily, he took a deep breath, letting the fragrance of spring envelop him. The pain of grief hung heavily in the air, but somehow, amid the anguish, there was a new understanding that tethered the community together. The candlelight vigil, the support that had flooded the town, and the commitment to honoring Emily's legacy had unveiled a newfound strength. It was not just a tragedy that had transpired. It was a catalyst for connection, a moment that compelled them to feel deeply and act together. Mitchell reflected on the emotional toll of the case, not just for Emily's family and friends, but for the entire town navigating their way through loss and fear. Justice had been served, yet the scars remained. Unseen, but intensely felt. In quiet conversations with locals over coffee, in moments shared watching their children play in the park, the townspeople began to weave back the fabric of their lives. They learned the importance of leaning into vulnerability to express sorrow, share our laughter, and embrace the memories that filled the void Emily had left behind. As he turned from the blossoming trees and took one last glance at the art station dedicated to Emily's memory, he felt a flicker of hope. They would grieve, they would remember, but they would also move forward always, carrying a piece of her with them, molded into the collective heart of Willow Creek. Together they would embrace life, creativity, and each other, standing firm against the darkness in a world that often felt all too heavy.